Okay, check this shit out. Today I'm going to show you one of my favorite recipes of all time. This is not a sexy recipe, but it is a delicious, nutritious lentil soup that is super hearty, and we eat this at least every couple weeks in our house all year round. Particularly good in the winter time. I know before I get started, a lot of people are not into lentils. They're small and they're crunchy, or they're gritty, or they're mealy. This recipe turns that on its head. I challenge anyone to try this recipe and then tell me they don't like lentils. The secret here is we're gonna cook them for a long time. They're gonna get really soft, they're gonna melt into the soup and make a really rich, hearty, delicious soup. It's full of vegetables. I put meat in mine for more protein. You don't have to do that. This could be easily a vegetarian soup. Let's go ahead and get right to it. I'm gonna start with some Costco ground beef. I'll get the heat on here. And I like to pat it dry. So the other thing I'm doing while I pat this dry is I'm gonna turn this into basically one big burger that I'm gonna fry in the pan here with some spices, and then later I'll break it up. So I usually just start with some paper towel, and I'll just kind of smash it kind of flat here. And I want it to be about the width of this pan. I like to get the meat going. I like to work in parallel. I'll get this meat browning, which takes a few minutes, and then I'll chop the veggies, and then we'll bring it all together. This recipe comes together really fast. It's really simple. Usually takes me 15 minutes of prep, and it's gonna make 6 servings of this soup that we'll eat for 3 or 4 days, right? Depending, and a lot of times we'll freeze some. It freezes really well. Okay, so you can see I've got a nice big patty there. So the secret here is seriously medium heat and lots of butter, and the butter solids are gonna kind of brown along with the meat, and it's gonna build a really nice crust on the bottom. Okay, so our butter is melted. This giant patty is going in, and again, I'm gonna put this in, just right in there on top of the butter, and we're gonna turn this heat down to, I'm gonna go 4 out of 10 here, and then we're gonna season it. So I always start with salt. I want salt getting into the meat, so salt it generously, and then I'm gonna go a healthy dose of garlic powder. I'm gonna do a nice dose of cumin. Essentially taco seasoning here. And then, I've talked about this before, I've got this New Mexico dried chili. This is smoky, it's spicy, it's sweet. It's somewhere between a chili powder, a paprika, and if you were to use cayenne powder. This one is a medium heat, so it's not too crazy. I'm gonna go very liberal with this because I really like the chili flavor. You might almost call this a lentil chili. I would call it a lentil bolognese, but it's a lentil stew. Call it what you want, it's delicious. Lentils are a really good source of vegetarian protein. They have about half the protein, I think, by weight as like chicken breast, but it's not a complete protein, so it's critical that you serve this with bread. Oh darn, right? One of my favorite meals of the year is this soup with homemade sourdough and like a really nice, I've got this New Zealand high-fat butter, really yellow. So you can see I'm putting that on there pretty liberally, and then we're gonna just let that sit on medium heat for like 5 or 10 minutes, and when we flip it, there's gonna be a really gorgeous crust on the other side. So while that's browning, I'm gonna go chop some vegetables. All right, so when it gets to this point, where you start to have blood coming out of the top, what I like to do is break it up. I have oil in the pan, turn down my heat a little bit, and now I'm just making browned ground beef. So really try to break those up into small chunks, and when we put the vegetables in, it'll kind of soak up a lot of that crust, and then when we put the tomatoes in, it will deglaze the pan. I'm not gonna use wine or beer or anything to deglaze. Tomatoes are acidic enough to do that. And I should have mentioned, this is basically a one-pot meal. So as I've got that brown meat, I'm gonna take here, I've got carrots, celery, onion, and then I've got parsnips in there. If you haven't had parsnips before, they're delicious. They're kind of like a fragrant carrot. They're sweet, like a carrot, but they also have a really nice kind of aromatic, floral, it's hard to describe, but parsnips are amazing. So we're not really looking for brown on this meat at all. We're just, on this veg, we're just trying to kind of soften them up. So I've got plenty of oil in there. I've got the meat. I put the veg in, and I'm going to just let this kind of cook for a few minutes, and then we'll add the final ingredients. Okay, so we browned the beef. While that was browning, I chopped the veg, carrots, onions, celery. It's been just sauteing here for like 5 minutes. I'm just trying to soften the vegetables, and now it all comes together. So this whole thing happened in like 10 or 15 minutes. What we're going to do is I'm going to add in, I buy these lentils from Trader Joe's. So this is a 1 pound pack. I'm looking for like half a pound. I just eyeball it. Lots of lentils. That's about half. I have a can of Cento tomatoes, San Marzano. These are fantastic. I just blended it because I want it to be smooth. So that goes into, I'm going to turn the heat down here while I'm working on it. This is the secret to good soup. I'm going to tell you my secret right now. When I make soup for people, they always go, wow, your soup is so great. The secret is double broth, okay? So I had a chicken from Costco. I threw it in a pot with carrots, onions, celery, some dried mushrooms. I simmered that for 24 hours, really light simmer. Then I strained it and I reduced it. So I had about 1.5 gallons of broth that I reduced here to a quart. So this is concentrated flavor. If you don't want to make your own soup base, you can go to the store and buy the box broth. But buy twice as much as you want if you can afford it, and cook it down to the amount you want, and you're concentrating that flavor. That's another reason why I didn't add salt. I added salt to the meat. There's not a lot of salt in here, but there is salt. But double broth, that is the secret to good soup. That's the chef's secret. So I'm going to add this in, and then normally I will dilute this a bit, especially the lentils will keep soaking up liquid. So I just have this guy's half full of water. So I'm going to put in some water, and then as it cooks, I'll come back and maybe add more water because the lentils will really, really soak up a lot of juice. So I'm going to add 2 or 3 bay leaves here. And just because I have it, I'm going to add some sprigs of fresh thyme. So we're basically almost done here. You know, I've been working from home, and what I'll do is I'll start this soup at like 4 p.m. and then you just put all this in the pot like I showed you. I'm going to cover it here and get it on a low simmer for like 2 hours. And like I was telling you, in those 2 hours, the lentils are going to soak up a lot of that juice, and then they're going to kind of start to burst a little bit. When you see the final product, you'll see lentils in there, but when you take a bite, you don't really notice the lentils. It's just a really rich, hearty soup. When you eat this soup, you feel like you're doing your body a favor. It's so good, and it's so delicious, and it's so satisfying. So we're basically there. I think looking at this now, I'm going to have to add more liquid. I'll adjust as we go, but all I'm going to do is cover it, and I'm going to keep them just a low simmer. I don't want this to boil hard. I just want it to heat for a while. All right, so that's it. It's been simmering for about 2.5 hours. I added a touch more salt, and that's basically it. You saw everything else. I drizzled a little bit of really nice local olive oil on there, put a tiny amount of shredded Gruyere left over from my last video, some fresh cracked pepper, and I've got a hunk of my fresh sourdough here with really nice butter on it. This is seriously one of my favorite meals that I eat, and like I said, I eat this at least 2 or 3 times a month. I make it, and then it lasts us a few days. Give it a try here. It's really hot. Oh, it's really tomato forward, all that tomato in there. The broth gives it just a real depth of flavor that you wouldn't get with just single broth. Like I said, this was essentially like triple broth. The lentils, I don't even detect them. They just kind of melt in. They melt into the soup. They give it this like really lush, silky, thick, hearty texture. A lot of times if you want to thicken a soup, you're going to add cream or butter or flour. I haven't added any of this. This is pure vegetables, ground beef, really rich broth, and tomatoes. So it's dinner time. I'm going to go enjoy this, and you should make this. It's really healthy. It's really good. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.